I think, Mr. Smith, I'm going to ask you questions about the Nevada bill because it's of great interest to me. In Oregon, we've been working on a somewhat similar piece of legislation for several years. And I've always been interested in the, whatever the rationale might be, when it comes to these pieces of federal land that are going to be given to these small cities or even larger cities, as compared to the total amount of federal land, in this case, Nevada. Of course, the total amount of federally controlled land in Nevada is 56 million acres, and we're talking about a fraction of that number here. But you indicate, and I wasn't paying close enough attention, the department has concerns about Titles 1, 2, and 5, which I'm staring at, so I'm just curious, what are those concerns, and what are those concerns that would rise to a level that would say we've got to be worried about what amounts to something less than 30,000 acres when the federal government has 56 million?
So I think the concerns that we have that we've cited in our written testimony as well as the oral testimony is that we're concerned with things like time frames. You know, like one example, there's titles in there for 180 days. It's very difficult to get that done within 100 days in 6 months. When you're talking about, you know, public involvement, when you're talking about NEPA, when you're talking about valuation. And so it's just technical things that we have concerns about.
It's not an objection to the merits, then. This is just a procedural
Correct.
concern that you have. Is that true as to all three of those sections, 1, 2, and 3? It's just procedural?
Yes, we'd like to work with the committee to make to get those changes.
You also mentioned in a previous exchange regarding the nature of wilderness, the restrictions. The chair asked what those restrictions on wilderness are. This is of great interest to me because if you look at different wildernesses that have been established, there's different protected access, for example. Do you anticipate any challenges when it comes to access to this wilderness that's been created in this particular bill?
That's something we want to work with the committee to make sure that that there is access in there, and also to protect the values of wilderness. And so there's just some technical things that have been raised by the locals that we need to work. So I don't have specifics on that, but we certainly stand ready to work with the chairman, bill sponsor, to do whatever we need to do.
I think the concern to me, looking back into Oregon, where we have this similar situation, the amount of land we're dealing with there is around 1 million acres. That is a combination of wilderness study area and then land with wilderness characteristics. But all this area, it's a huge area. It's huge. And so to lock it up and not allow folks to use existing roads to access for, let's say, fire suppression purposes or cultural purposes, not a good idea. So I'm just really asking you, do you, as a department, take a position on access and try to restrict it? Or if a road fails by washing out or something, do you allow motorized vehicles to go in and repair it? This is of great concern in Oregon. I'm sure it's of concern in Nevada also. So what's your department's position on access when it comes to, first of all, motorized for the purposes I just mentioned, you know, cultural, for example, and then repairing those roads, the existing ones, of course?
You know, typically before we designate that, we have a wilderness study, so there's lots of public comment involvement, and we take all that in consideration. So I don't know specifics on that, but at the end of the day, all wilderness is designated by Congress, so there's been a thorough vetting before we declare anything wilderness. And we certainly, like I said, when you're talking about fire, when you're talking about safety, when you're talking about oil and gas activities, a lot of that is allowed in wilderness where they're validating existing rights.
Right. So there was a little point of clarification I would like on that access for mining or gas or whatnot. If you declare the wilderness, isn't the only thing that's preserved those claims that already exist?
That's correct.
So any new activity is barred.
That is correct, once it's been designated wilderness.
Right. So in your answer to the chairman earlier, the qualification should have been, I think you actually made it, if those claims exist, if those filings have occurred, then those are protected. But anything new is barred.
Yes, with the exceptions, if you have emergency situation for safety or wildfire, there are exceptions.
Right.
But it depends on the situation.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yield back.